Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a review slash commentary on a documentary that I just watched last night called The Rise of Jordan Peterson. Now, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you watch The Rise of Jordan Peterson. You can find it on Amazon Prime. I watched this documentary because I wanted to know a little bit more about who Mr. Peterson is. I have a friend who's really into Jordan Peterson. I have not read any of his books. I have not watched any of his videos on YouTube. I have seen some little snippets of interviews with him, sort of intermixed with other videos in like a collage type video that you can find everywhere on YouTube. But I know that he has become kind of an important voice in our times. So I thought, well, I'd like to know a little bit more about who this is. I thought it served as a good overview for people like me who are uninitiated. We don't really know who this is. It did tell the story about how Mr. Peterson sort of became a thing at all that is talked about. Basically, he was responding to or reacting to things that were going on in Canadian law related to the freedom of speech. And I think if you are a person who really appreciates the idea of individual freedom, there's probably a lot of things about Jordan Peterson and the things that he defends and asserts that you will probably appreciate as well. He gave access to interviews with his personal friends, with members of his immediate family, and that provided some insight. It also was given access to his private residence. You got to go in there and see him kind of in his own environment there. I think there were a few things the longer the documentary went on, and as it finally wrapped up, it left me with a couple of unresolved questions about Jordan Peterson that I really felt like if they had included in the documentary or really sort of zeroed in on some of these things, that I think would have really given me a better grasp on who Mr. Peterson is and why he does the things that he does. And maybe you're watching this review and you are super into Jordan Peterson and you know the answers because, again, I'm giving this from the perspective of someone who doesn't. I have not read any of the books or seen the videos. So maybe you are maybe you're the director of the documentary, or maybe you're Jordan Peterson, and that would be great. You could just jump right in. Or maybe you're just someone who has followed him for some length and you have those answers. Feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear your insight on this as well. Maybe you've seen the documentary. But I feel like one of the questions that I was left with was why is it that Jordan Peterson continues to do the things that he does in regard to, you know, the public speaking and the events and, you know, sort of asserting in this ongoing battle between tyranny and individual freedoms. What I'm not questioning is, should he do it? I think he should do it, and I think he's doing a pretty great job of doing what he's doing. I just wanted to know, as the watcher of the documentary, why? Why does he continue to do it? I understand why he initially jumped in where he did because of the ridiculousness of what was being proposed. And even he, in the documentary, admits, well, yeah, that's an arbitrary, you know, place. I could have jumped in earlier or, you know, somewhere else, but this is where I decided to jump into this fight, if you will, But why does he continue to do it? I wanted to know more about that. They talked about in the documentary dreams that he had as a child, and also made reference to ongoing dreams that he had or that his wife had, and that just wasn't sufficient for me to sort of latch onto. I mean, unless Jordan Peterson is some, very strong believer in the idea of dreams and the subconscious mind, that wasn't enough for me to answer the question as to why does he keep doing this? Why does he keep marching forward? Why does he pursue this important battle? Now, if Mr. Peterson is sort of thinking about dreams in the context of, let's say, we're talking about the prophet Joel and how his prophecy is repeated in the New Testament by the Apostle Peter, right, where the Spirit of God is poured out on all flesh, and young men will see visions and old men will dream dreams. I mean, is that... see, this is the kind of stuff that I was looking for, is what does Jordan Peterson believe? Because belief is what drives all of our choices. And I really wanted to I was hoping that the documentary would dig a little bit deeper into what does Jordan Peterson actually believe? What is the bigger picture, the spiritual underpinnings of what does Jordan Peterson believe? Because that would answer the question, why does he keep pressing on in this fight? There was another interesting piece in the documentary where they touched on the idea of Jordan Peterson's personal struggle with depression. They talked to his wife and his daughter. His kids were there. There was one interesting piece here where they were discussing that this was something that wasn't just experienced by Mr. Peterson, but was also being experienced by his daughter, and that she had sort of gone on this dietary experiment, taking copious notes about what she was or was not eating and how those dietary things were affecting her mood, and that she was trying some things, and then several days into this one particular experiment, her depression lifted. And so that she went to her father and said, "Hey Dad, you got to try this. This worked for me." And they sort of implied in the documentary, after an interview with his wife, saying, "Hey, this is what a normal morning would be like. I would tiptoe out of the bedroom, go downstairs, read a book, do some exercising, and then sort of call up to my husband, and I just couldn't get him out of bed because the depression was just crushing him, and he just struggled to get out of bed in the morning because of it. Until he tried this dietary thing that our daughter was doing, and now he gets up and it's all gone." And that was the extent of their discussion about this, I think, interesting part of Jordan Peterson's life, and that is why was he experiencing this? Was it just purely a sort of biological, dietary related issue? Was it something deeper? Was it a combination of both of those things? They never really sort of pinpointed what the source of it was, and why he thinks that's different now. I'm not sure where these things, like, on one hand, the sort of the larger question of what does Jordan Peterson believe, and how does that continue to drive his engine forward, and also what is the deeper story of this depression part of his life's journey, and those deeper questions. I don't know where to land these unanswered questions? Was it because they were never asked? I mean, does this land at the feet of the director? Was it because they were asked and then choices were made later in the editing process? You know, I don't know. I don't know whether this was just something to lay at Mr. Peterson's feet because they were asked and he just wasn't forthcoming, or maybe at the director's feet because they just never got asked directly. I don't know. I think it's not surprising that someone of the academic achievement and intellectual prowess of someone like a Jordan Peterson would experience depression, because I think this is just my opinion slash analysis of it, and that is that I think the more a person sort of devotes themselves to academic pursuits and intellectual pursuits, him specifically going into the field of psychology so that he could have a better understanding of history and geopolitics, that ultimately what you wind up becoming is like a coroner. Whether they realize it or not, what they're actually doing is they're doing a crime scene investigation, is what they're doing. If I could make that analogy, they're basically dissecting the body and they're discovering what has led us to this point. What got us here? We know, anybody who's picked up a history book knows that the story of history is a junkyard of failed tyrannies, one after the other. Freedom is not the default position of humanity. Freedom is the exception of the rule. Freedom is the bubble. Freedom is the weird thing in history. The default of all of the human condition is tyranny and slavery. And it really doesn't take much for tyranny to grow. It's sort of like, if you think, can I make an analogy where you're trying to grow a vegetable garden? Okay, that's going to take a lot of work, and it has to be very intentional, and you have to be proactive about it. But if you want to just grow a yard full of weeds, that doesn't take any work at all, right? All tyranny requires is to figure out what people want in order to feel secure and safe. People value the idea, in most cases, of make me safe, make me feel comfortable, provide for me, and then they'll just go along with whatever. That passion, that thirst, that unquenchable hunger for liberty and freedom is a unique thing in history. And one of the, in my opinion, unique ingredients for it has been the message of the gospel, has been the message of Christianity. Remember, Jesus is the one who says, whom the Son sets free is free indeed, right? And in the New Testament, the apostles say, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Don't let the yoke of slavery be put on you again. See, true freedom is something that begins as a spiritual reality. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm sort of like, I wanted to know, what does Jordan believe about these things? What's his belief system? Because that's going to answer my question as to what's driving him, what continues to drive him forward in this fight against tyranny. I think we can all agree tyranny is a bad thing. Tyranny is responsible for a lot of dead people in the world. Tyranny is responsible for a lot of evil in the world. We should want to stop it. But where do you even begin to define what is good and what is evil? Where do you even begin to define what are those parameters and where do those lines exist, and why are you willing to fight it? One of the things that I enjoyed watching in this documentary was how college age and young people respond to Jordan Peterson. There were several instances where they would come up to him, whether it was on the street or at one of these events that he does, where a speaking engagement, and they would come up to him, shake his hand, and talk about how what he has said, or a book that he wrote, or something has had a profound impact on their life. I really appreciated that. You have to say, when you see people doing that, that this is a man who is able to communicate a certain sense of care and concern for people. He genuinely, when he was talking about his interactions with people, you know, in the moments in the documentary after the fact, when he was just reflecting on these interactions, you got the sense that he really does genuinely care for people, loves people. And I like that about him. I couldn't help but watch as the young people were coming up to him. And if I could just say, again, I haven't read any of his books, or, you know, I don't have a context here. I'm just saying the way that young people were emotionally responding and reacting with Jordan Peterson, it reminded me as if an orphan were expressing their love and affection and gratitude for a father who had adopted them. That spoke to me as a dad. And it tells me that there's a lot of young people in our society who are not getting that foundation. That family structures are so disrupted that a man like Jordan Peterson is meeting a very real need in the lives of young people who need a father, who need someone to tell them, these are the principles that will ground you. These are the things. Here is the course you should set. Here are the things that are good. Run after those things. And that was the sort of impact. That was the way I was watching it as a dad. It just sort of felt like that these young orphans were coming to their adopted dad and telling him how important he was. So Jordan Peterson is obviously doing some very good work. Check out the video, the documentary, The Rise of Jordan Peterson. If you know or you have insight onto those sort of unanswered questions that I had watching the documentary, feel free to comment below. Thanks for watching.